a lot of games are geared towards similar goals. A lot of control schemes are very standardized, and a lot of visuals are similar. But some games really buck those trends. And today, we want to talk about those. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 games that aren't like anything you've ever played. Starting off at number 10, it's Pacific Drive. So let's say you throw Stalker, Jalopy, and I guess Returnal into a blender and hit puree. That's what Pacific Drive is. And when it released back in February, this horror roguelike where you're mostly driving a car threw a lot of people for a loop. The premise by itself would qualify the game for this list, but the experience just gets stranger. Rather than your bog standard zombie apocalypse or anything like that, Pacific Drive has you contend with various anomalies that start off relatively small, easy to avoid, and they only get stranger and more dangerous as you progress. You can get killed, of course, but the thing you're really sweating over is your car. This is your safe space, your home base, your only means of transportation, and it's all rolled into one thing, and if it gets trashed, you're screwed. It sounds like that'd be really frantic, but this game has a surreal atmosphere that's sometimes really oddly serene and chill, and sometimes just completely terrifying. For the first dozen or so hours, this game really feels like anything can happen. That's the sense of unknown that probably really effectively makes it creepy. Even doing something as basic as scavenging for supplies can be really tense, because you're always on the clock in this game. The world of Pacific Drive is recognizable, but it's off or wrong in a way that kind of just throws you off. It's not aggressive about it. It's not in-your-face weird like some other games are out there, but that almost makes it feel weirder, because sometimes it lures you into this false sense of security before throwing something totally unexpected at you. At number 9 is Outpost Infinity Siege. This one just came out, and while it's not intentionally surreal, it's just such an insane game that I feel like it has to go on this list. The basic premise is something we've heard a million times already. You're a generic soldier man fighting a malevolent AI, bog standard at this point in time, even if the weirdly impressive production values contrast pretty hard against the quality of the writing and voice acting, which is absolutely terrible.
One day, I'm gonna zip that bloody mouth of yours.
Relax. It's a reverse jinx. Here she is. Outpost 11. Take care of her.
The weird part's the gameplay, though. It's a tower defense game, basically, where you play in first person. You run around, you collect resources on these maps. They sometimes have, stalker-like locations in them. You customize guns in a weirdly convoluted way. You pilot a mecha. Build guns, recruit soldiers, there's jumping puzzles for some reason. It's all over the place. But what stands out is how over the top the production values are. This level of baffling experimentation is something I'd expect from a mod or something, but not this. Combat can get absolutely insane at higher difficulties, and there's so many interlocking systems and strange gameplay choices, it's impossible to cover it all in a few minutes. It's a game that wants to be everything, and the end result's kind of a mess, at least now while I'm writing this. I'm not 100% sure I can recommend you play it in the state it's in currently, but it is an ongoing production, I guess, and it is definitely unique. You can't call it anything if not that. At number 8 is Roller Drome, one of those games that sounds like one of those high-concept elevator pitches that never get made, but yeah, this one exists. The gameplay isn't hard to describe, but it manages to feel like something pretty unique. It's Tony Hawk, but a shooter. Instead of dropping you into a map and telling you to get the highest score, it tells you to kill all the guys and also get a high score. How do these two seemingly disconnected elements actually work together? Well, it's actually fairly simple. If you want to reload, you gotta perform a trick. It's super easy to explain, but very tough to master. Trying to do tricks while aiming takes a lot of getting used to, but it's a very satisfying experience once you get the hang of it. That's That's not the only odd thing about the game, though. The unusual flat art style is striking and unique, and in between each mission, you usually get to walk around the backstage area, check emails, do things like that, so there's a narrative adventure element to the game as well. It's one of the most straightforward games on this list, but manages to really feel like its own thing because of how elegant the controls are. They're not really like something else. I've played multiple games that have some kind of shooting score system or action games that incorporate elements of extreme sports games, but nothing quite accomplishes what Rollerdrome does. It really nails it. At number 7 is Who's Leela. This game doesn't need an explanation to say how weird it is. All you need is a screenshot. One look at this and you're just like, what the hell, man? It's a branching adventure game with one absolutely bonkers twist. The way that you do anything, you have to manipulate the guy's face in order to communicate with people. Like, that's your primary means of communication. Dragging around the parts of this guy's face to form the gross approximation of what passes for human emotion. If the weird faces aren't off-putting enough, there's also a really surreal and off-putting story about a missing girl, and you're the last guy who saw her, so congrats, you're the number one suspect, and you gotta navigate the world and figure out what's going on. Not that you're gonna get a ton of answers from the game's many endings. The more you find out, the more baffling it all gets. The game clearly wears its David Lynch inspirations on its sleeves. Might be a little too heavy on the Lynch references, actually. But the core gameplay and visuals they're so odd that the game really stands on its own as a uniquely off-putting horror adventure. At number 6 is Clash Artifacts of Chaos, made by Ace Team, which, if you know anything about them, you know it's going to be weird. These guys are behind oddities like Zero Clash, Rock of Ages, and the recent Eternal Cylinder, which, by the way, if you're going to use the word cylinder in the title of anything, yeah, it's probably going to be weird. Not that it's not an appropriate title. It is. Interesting game, too. But at first glance, Clash actually kind of appears to be the most accessible game. Yeah, the world's extremely strange. The story's inexplicable. But look at your dude running around. It's God of War with an oddball martial arts twist. If that's all the game was, it probably wouldn't earn a spot on this list, but it's the added complication of the relic that makes it weird. So before battle with any humanoid enemies, you play this game called The Ritual, where you roll dice and draw lines and pull down spikes, and it's bizarre. It seems impenetrable at first, but it's actually pretty fun once you get the hang of it. You won't, by the way, from just listening to what I'm saying about it.
Stop smiling. Teeth. Wait, little hermit.
What makes the game so important is that if you lose, the enemy activates a bunch of advantages, and if you win, you get those advantages. Along with that, there's a customizable combat system with its own complications, a bizarre open world with an inexplicable day-night cycle where for some reason your guy transforms into like this rot golem guy at night. You can equip different body parts. Like it's a weird system. Maybe it wouldn't be if it was explained better or some in-world justification made sense was given. But they're just kind of like throwing artifacts of chaos at you. Honestly, every game from this dev is super weird, and any one of them could have a place on this list. But I think the contrast between the more accessible stuff in this game and the weird nonsense makes it especially interesting, particularly to me. At number 5, Illbleed, which was released on the Dreamcast in 2001. It's a survival horror game developed by the most appropriately named studio ever, Crazy Games. Not an exaggeration, because even among this crop of completely bizarre games, hell, if you restrict it even to the Dreamcast, which was home to some pretty bizarre stuff, this game, it stands alone. Rather than your usual survival horror experience where you wander around a spooky location, collect weapons and ammo and solve puzzles, it's more like a haunted house simulator. You have no real weapons and actual enemies are kind of rare. What you're actually doing is using a special tool to, I guess, find and disarm various traps hidden around levels, which the traps are basically jump scares. They increase your heart rate. If your heart rate goes up too high, then you just die, which is the probably most normal thing about this game. That sounds correct. Like, look at the detector, though. You got sight, hearing, smell, and sixth sense. What do any of these meters mean? I can't really tell you. It's one of the more bafflingly opaque gameplay systems in this mess of a game. The real showstopper are the traps, of course, which are uniquely bizarre and ridiculous. They're often stupid, even laugh out loud funny at times. But the game wants you to avoid them. They can kill you, but they're also the thing that you would actually want to see in the game. There's so much more strange stuff about this game. I mean, there's an entire extended Toy Story parody that ends with you fighting a demonic Sonic the Hedgehog. And when I say fighting, I'm not 100% sure that's entirely the correct description. I don't know. It's so weird. The gameplay is just the beginning of the madness when it comes to Illbleed. And number 4 is Killer 7. This 2005, I don't know, like action game, I guess. I don't know exactly what to call it. It still amazes me that it was published by Capcom and came out on the GameCube. It was directed by Suda51. It's probably still, at this point in time, his weirdest game, at least in terms of gameplay. I'm, again, not sure how to describe it. You control a member of the Killer 7 in third person. You can only move on rails, and you get an option what direction you want to go when you hit an intersection. Enemies are these creatures called Heaven Smiles that are not visible by default. You have to scan for them in first person and shoot their weak points. These are the only games and the enemies outside the bosses. When you're not killing, there's an utterly nonsensical set of puzzles to solve, and weirdos who talk in pure gibberish. The story is totally inexplicable. It takes wild swings and detours in whatever direction it feels like, and it's mostly extremely dark, satirical, and, I mean, it's Suda51, so you should understand it's intentionally off-putting. It's an absolutely insane game by any metric, and frankly, a miracle that it came out. In this game's case, the actual gameplay is the worst part about it. It's one of those games where you have to force yourself to get to the good stuff, which is everything else. There's a reason no other game plays like it, but it's so relentlessly unusual, I can't help but marvel that it exists. And, you know, I always look back on it fondly, even though I don't know what good things I have to say about how it works. Moving on to number 3, let's talk about Sunset Overdrive. This 2014 launch title for the Xbox came from an unlikely partnership between Insomniac Studios, the guys behind Ratchet & Clank, the Resistance games, and recently the PlayStation-exclusive Spider-Man games. The company actually a fairly recent acquisition for Sony. This, along with Fuse, are sort of the forgotten Insomniac games, but at least this game deserves better because it's one of the most unique and fun open-world games out there. You can see a lot of what Spider-Man would eventually become here. It's an open-world game with a focus on constant movement and speed. The environment is just a playground for movement. You can bounce on top of cars, you can grind on telephone wires, slide across water, wall run. There's tons of options here, but you're actually going to use them because the game strongly incentivizes you to stay off the ground and keep moving. If you're just walking around, your character is slow, weak, and really vulnerable to attack, but if you're bouncing and grinding, you're much safer. And while you're doing this stuff, you're building up a combo meter that grants you extra powers that power up your weapons or generate tornadoes or all kinds of other wild effects. The gun stuff is familiar to anybody who's played the Ratchet games. There's a lot of oddball weapons here, but the movement powers combined with the shooting make it feel like Jet Set Radio combined with Infamous or something. Like, it's a really unique experience, especially in a genre that's rightly often derided for its lack of innovation. Because this game relies so much on environmental interactions, the actual open world is one of the best ever. It's entertaining as hell to move around this place, and the nature of the gameplay leads to a lot of unique missions. It's an incredibly fun game. Most of the time with games that really try to do something different, they come out kind of half-baked, especially when it's a developer's first open world game. But these guys are pros and they make it look easy. The actual story and humor, it's not for everybody. Like, the game goes really hard on being wacky, and to some people that is going to come off as super annoying. I am not one of those people, but if I were, I wouldn't mind, because I don't return to this game for that reason. I return to it for the gameplay. It's so unique and fun, and it holds everything together and does not feel like a decade-old game at this point. It still feels ahead of the curve. And number 2 is Hellish Quart, a sword fighting game that is, I mean, it's weird. It's developed by the ex-senior animator for Witcher 3, a guy by the name of Jacob Kessel, or maybe Cassil. I'm not 100% sure. But the inspiration for this game is 1997's Bushido Blade. It's basically a physics-based, early access sword fighter, and it's crazy. You can probably tell from the footage, it doesn't feel anything like any other sword fighting game you've played. It does feel a little like Bushido Blade, but not a lot, because Bushido Blade, while it certainly does have a not entirely unlike this control scheme, this has physics in it, and it's all physics. There is also a VR mode. I obviously haven't tried that, but I would highly recommend checking this out. It's a very strange game. I don't know, this is one that I bought and I played it for a while just because it's very strange. It's not a game that you're going to have an easy time getting good at, per se. In fact, I would say that's not going to happen. And I think that people who get really good at this they're going to be freaks. I don't know. Maybe it's just that it's foreign to me. Like, it's like Bushido Blade, but not like Bushido Blade. Give it a shot. It's weird. And finally, at number 1, it's Detuned. It definitely unlike anything else I've ever played. I can say that. This demo released back on the PS3, it pushes the definition of what a game is, I will say. The argument could be made that it is not a game, but more of an experimental art piece, but hey, it's interactive, so whatever. There's a guy sitting in a chair. If you press buttons, things happen. His head will change. He'll start dancing. The filters in the background change. Stuff like that. And that's basically it. It's kind of a trippy audio-visual experience, but it's so damn weird it deserves a spot here. Nothing about it, I mean nothing, makes any sense whatsoever. Why is his head transforming? What are these little phone mascot things in the background? What is up with the weird blurring whenever he moves? What is anything? What is any of this? There are no answers also. It's a game made by a German demo group. Like, they're not trying to make something that makes any sense. It's just bizarre for its own sake, but that doesn't make it not bizarre. Like, mission accomplished, Detuned. And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconHero. We'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.